Hey, everybody, welcome to Something Pretty, your favorite Deadwood podcast, where we, Wes and Clay, with our wiles of bullshitters, may have used as feint to occupy yourselves. How are you, Clay?
I'm good. I think most podcasts can be described as the wiles of bullshitters.
Yeah, that's the well, we're going to get into it, I suppose. But I was thinking that this episode, what this one is about, and we're about to talk about Leviathan Smiles. I think it's pronounced Leviathan. It's not Leviathan.
Which is either a Queensryche album or possibly one of the lesser Hellraiser stories.
Yeah, it's that's Leviathan frowns as a frowny face. What was a frowny face emoji? Do you know the story of Leviathan?
Not specifically.
No, I had to look it up.
He's a big guy or a
big
animal
sea serpent
or creature.
Yeah, big sea serpent, I guess. But
man,
in the Old Testament,
I could talk for a while about my likes and dislikes about sea serpents because I think I might have said this before. I think the sea serpent, number one on my list of most feared cryptid, like Bigfoot, whatever. Don't really care. Loch Ness Monster.
Are you talking about like fighting them or running into them or something like that?
Just like the prospect that they exist.
Okay, right.
You know, like Bigfoot, whatever. But like the Loch Ness Monster has always been terrifying to me. Like that, yes. I think it's because of the water aspect of it. You know,
yeah, you can't see him coming. You could see Bigfoot running down the mountain at you, I think, and try to run away best you can.
Or walking in that weird like
swagger
70s cartoon underground cartoon gait that he has.
Yeah,
but like I think it's because you have no idea how big anything below your feet in the water is at any given time.
Yeah.
And I both am happy that Leviathan type things don't exist, but also a little bit bummed out. I mean, I guess they technically do exist depending on how you look at it, but
right. Do you consider a whale to be one or something like that, or a plesiosaur or something? Because that's what Nessie is. Nessie's just a plesiosaur that got stuck in the ocean. Got stuck in the lake for 1,000,000 years.
People plesiosaur.
Yes,
just doing stuff for everybody. Always showing up for pictures.
Yeah, always willing for a picture. Yeah. No, it's the thing swimming up at you like a bullet while you're sitting in the water is the scariest part, but you can only see so far down. And
that's the scariest shot in Jaws, when that like overhead shot where the one guy's like treading water and then just like up out of the blackness, it just kind of comes up and grabs him.
Yep. This is Leviathan Smiles. We've gotten our biblical references and cryptid references out of the way, and now we're going to play the music for the Something Pretty podcast. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to break it down.
You're listening to a podcast that is a lie agreed upon. Join Wes and Clay as they discuss HBO's Deadwood and tell you something pretty.
This is Leviathan Smiles. It's episode 8 of Deadwood's 3rd season, directed by Ed Bianchi, written by Kem Nunn. In this one, called Leviathan Smiles, Merrick distributes the pioneer containing Bullock's letter. Wyatt and Morgan Earp arrive by stage, claiming to have been ambushed by road agents. Steve is kicked in the head while shoeing a horse. Was he shoeing a horse or de-shoeing a horse? Anyway.
De-shoeing.
De-shoeing, yeah. I don't know if it goes both ways there. Wyatt Earp's ambush story withers under Swearengen's questions. My opinion, which may owe to vanity, your tale's full of shit. Hearst visits the Pioneer office and warns Merrick of coming events. Aunt Lou begs Hearst to send someone for Odell to deliver a lucky brooch. Brooch or brooch? I don't know. What's with the vocabulary words today? Tolliver wants to move the Earps against Bullock, with Hearst's okay. Wyatt emerges a winner from the Bella Union just as Morgan Earp lands in a dispute with Burns over a whore's services. A half-dozen riders come down the thoroughfare, torches aloft. Hearst's muscle has arrived.
You buying those goddamn tools or not?
I wouldn't have chosen not meaning to buy.
As opposed to leaving chosen goods piled in the middle of the fucking store for every other piece of business to be conducted over and around. It's customary to stand by till the transaction's finished.
I was called elsewhere.
Elsewhere, meaning the gym.
You wouldn't be doubting my brother's word.
pay for the tools and remove them, and I'll cease to doubt your ability to do so.
So are we just done with Odell? Is that like it?
No.
Okay.
No.
I just, knowing the way this show works, I was like, well, if we never see him again, I guess I won't be surprised.
Not spoiling. I don't know if we see him again. He's not done. His story is not done, but I don't know if we actually physically see him again. So
gotcha.
We'll get to that. This is Leviathan Smiles. I don't know if you remember a couple episodes ago. I have to keep saying all this SEO, all this AI audio search stuff. I have to say the episode title.
Is that a thing? Is that a thing now? Audio?
It is, yeah.
SEO? Really?
Yes. There's a podcast service I tried out. It's called Swell AI, and it uses ChatGPT as like its backbone. But what it does is you upload audio, and it spits out like a sort of transcript for you and a summary and a bunch of like social media crap that you could put out there and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I never wanted to pay for it. It's extremely expensive for what it does, and I don't think it does a very good job at this point. But the thing I noticed is that if you don't say it, it has a very hard time identifying what the podcast name is and the title of the episode that you're doing, because it just has no basis for it. Like I did the Star Trek one, and the Star Trek podcast doesn't have a real name, and it could not identify the name of the podcast effectively.
Right.
So
what if you try to like subvert what it does, Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, and just say things
Orange
that, like,
lemonade
to get more people, Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, and get more ears on your podcast, even if that's not necessarily what your show's about, Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce.
Crypto. No, I imagine that's down the line. People find a way to gamify all that shit. But our confusion with the Leviathan Smiles album, black metal album, is definitely going to happen at some point down the line.
Is it Travis? Is it Travis Kelce? I'm not following that stuff.
He's like the tight end or something.
Player?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why she likes him.
Yeah, well, yeah. What are they're making? I haven't watched an NFL game in a long time, just because of the kids. But I guess they were making out at the football game or something, and that's big news.
It really is one of those like old Hollywood celebrity kind of things where it's like, if you just show up at my game, that's really going to do a lot for me in my career. But they seem to be, I don't know, they seem to be into each other. Who's to say?
Did you see the video I posted of Bruce Springsteen with his halftime show with the guacamole line?
No, I saw it, but I didn't watch it.
I've watched that 500 times today. It's so goddamn funny. It's 8 seconds of pure genius. I'll put a link into this podcast. Anyway, this is Leviathan Smiles. A couple episodes ago, I mentioned the Vulture list that ranked all the episodes, and I had mentioned that the one we were doing, I forget which one it was, and I'm not looking at the list, but the previous episode was like one of the bottom 5 episodes in the show. This is the bottom episode on Vulture's list. It's the least enjoyable Deadwood episode, according to them. It's number 36 on their ranking.
Interesting.
A lot of the other critical reviews are not super positive on this one. This one has a little bit more of, like in the Deadwood Bible and Sappenwell's reviews, there's a little bit more of a criticism of things. I don't know. I mean, one of the major things is the Earp storyline. We don't necessarily have to start there, but the criticism seems to come out is that the Earp storyline kind of feels like a guest star of the week thing in a way that's not particularly appealing to some people. I guess it just goes further into what I like about the show is that I kind of like the Earp story. Like I like the Earps showing up in this. Their storyline is nothing special to me, and I don't think that thematically or anything, it has a whole bunch of meaning to it. But I kind of like random new people showing up in Deadwood and interacting with people. I think that it comes with a few downsides to that, obviously, which is that you have to shelve some of the other characters who've been around, and maybe the story doesn't amount to anything by the end of it. But I don't know. This one, I feel like this one is, maybe it's one of the weaker episodes. I have a really hard time telling them. If I were to rank all the Deadwood episodes, it would just be a list of like the order of the episodes that I could think about them or something. Like I'd have a really hard time ranking them definitively. But I didn't think this one is all that bad, but it has some issues in it, which I guess we're going to get to. But what would you think about this one?
Well, I wonder if is this a ranking done by recently? It is, right?
I can look it up as you.
Well, the only reason I ask is because like I can see the modern TV viewer feeling like this is kind of a weird
2019.
time.
This
2019, yeah, so
posted.
pretty recent.
Yeah.
But like, this is what, 12 episodes in the season?
Yeah, there's 36 total.
Yeah, so if you're introducing Wyatt Earp in episode 8, it
Of
does,
the final season.
of 12, it does feel a little bit like, how do we get people to watch this show? Let's bring Captain Kirk onto the Strange New World Enterprise,
Yeah.
However, I will say, well, first of all, I wasn't even 100% sure they were telling the truth, given the way that this show works. I thought maybe it was a couple people pretending to be Wyatt Earp. But
Yeah.
the fact that nobody seemed to know or care who Wyatt Earp was really took that notion away, because I feel like if they had been like, oh, so you're the famed lawman, blah, 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 that I'd be like, okay, maybe these guys are full of shit. But since they just seem to be two more shit kickers in the town, I don't see why they would need to fabricate their identities.
Yeah.
Unless they do. I don't know. Maybe they do. But
Well, Deadwood's
I
not a show to really like. If they're doing anything with the Earps, it is dismantling their mythology around them, right? Like,
yeah, they're real shitheads in this.
Yeah, well, particularly Morgan. Morgan's worse than
Yes.
Wyatt, but like they are,
They
like
couldn't find a bad thing to say about Virgil though, so they left him out.
yeah, right. He didn't show up. Maybe he'll show up next episode. They don't. The show is possibly trying to like dismantle the mythology of them, but I think it ties into what the episode is doing in a larger sense too. But it's definitely portraying them in a negative way, and it's not the kind of show that does its history by being like, hey, everyone knows the Earps and let's have a story with them in it.
Yeah.
So I think it saves it there. I found how scummy they are to be the most interesting part of their storyline, really. Like, they're not very pleasant people. Go ahead. It felt like you wanted to say something there.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the thing that is interesting about bringing them in, I'm curious to see where they go with them, because I think they kind of do thematically bring something to the show, because the two characters who don't really, the two main characters who don't really have mirror images of each other are Bullock and Saul, and Wyatt and Morgan really do kind of represent the mirror sliding door version of Bullock and Saul.
Yeah, that's true.
So having them interact with, especially in that final scene where they talk to each other, where he's like, even when I wasn't a cop, I couldn't resist beating up certain kind of people. And he's like, yeah, that's the last thing to go.
Hard to get rid of that.
That was really interesting. So in bringing Wyatt Earp, this version of Wyatt Earp in at this point, where, I mean, the first 3/4 of the episode is Bullock basically on the edge of walking into Hearst's house and shooting him in the face in cold blood, essentially. So bringing sort of it's not like a mirror universe thing where it's like, oh, Wyatt Earp is the evil version of Bullock, but there's definitely a lot of similarities to them. The difference being that Bullock chose a certain path that Earp, at least at this point, has chosen to abandon.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of helps him reel it in a bit at the end.
Yeah, I think that they're a decent comparison against each other. I think that on the critical side of it, I think that it's a big highlight how the miscasting of Oliphant went. When Bullock is standing up against the Earps, it never feels I never get a sense of the tension that I think the show wants those scenes to have with them.
Yeah.
Oliphant's Bullock kind of comes across as I think he needs to be like more sure of himself or something. Like the scene where he's like, you left $200 worth of shit in the middle of the store, and he like confronts them about it. They all have their hands on their weapons at that point, right? And it feels like it should be a really tense scene. I think that Bullock and Oliphant's performance just makes Bullock seem a little bit too he's not like steady-footed enough or something. Like, he's a little bit too meek feeling to me or something. There's not this sense of two titans about to throw down with each other that I think the show wants to do. And I think that Deadwood is setting up Bullock to be a kind of a better person than Earp is at this point, at least. Like he's more on the straight and narrow than Earp is like a confused version of Bullock trying to figure it out. And I just don't think that the performance of Bullock really carries that across enough where you feel like there's an intensity to him that counteracts what what the Earps are bringing against him effectively, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I also don't particularly think the guy playing Wyatt Earp is bringing a lot to the table. And maybe that's just me being surprised with their characterization in this. And that's not to say it was bad, because I liked it, but I think bringing in a name as famous as Wyatt Earp and playing him as subdued as they do feels weird when you're trying to have these moments where they're kind of, it's Bullock versus Wyatt, like kind of staring each other down a bit, because they're not giving you, all right, what am I trying to say here? I think if they're not going to give you the Kurt Russell traditional type of Wyatt Earp, then there needs to be something else to that character that is a bit more shorthand to bring him up to the level that you're really kind of like that deserves that kind of tension. And I don't know if there really is anything. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's by design. But I just wasn't. I didn't find him to be particularly memorable. I thought Morgan was pretty good, but I didn't think Wyatt was particularly memorable in that respect.
Yeah, he has to play more of the straight man to Morgan's wild-eyed lunatic. There's a post on the Reddit of Deadwood. Is just it's a picture of Morgan Earp he's doing that like tongue thing when he's looking at Bullock, and it's just the caption is just insane fucking person, which is what Swearingen called Bullock in that prior episode.
Yeah, I just don't think I don't think that Wyatt is. I'm not getting that like quiet intensity coming off of him the way that I think they might want it to. And so I don't know. I don't know if that's not. If maybe it's just a matter of double miscasting.
Yeah.
Myself and him over there, my strong right arm, along with Tom Nuttall, that runs the saloon number 10, was the first operators in this here camp.
So?
Turned the first card. Sold the first booze and snatch. Road agents. Story goes, don't work these hills, but by my leave, which, if that's true, explains why I'm fucking interested in what you're telling.
So,
go the fuck ahead and tell me then.
me and my brother happened along, and we balked some unknown parties who was having a few shots at the stage. That's all.
Ears flat back to the head, nose without boils, fucking modest, a proper hero, Dan. How many unknown parties?
2 or maybe 3.
What removed from you?
100 feet and more.
Describe them.
Yeah, they broke off. We returned fire.
Describe them.
My meaning would be them firing. I didn't get a good fucking look at them. I'd also say you're fucking free with your reprehending tone.
So I think that the reason, well, there's before I get to like the continuation off of that point, I think that one of the things I really do like about the Earps in this one is that they do manage to get Wyatt in a scene where he's talking to Al, and it's a great callback. One of my favorite Al scenes continues to be the one in like the second episode when he's talking to Persimmon Phil about what happened with the guys on the trail that killed the Norwegian family.
Yeah.
Is that like keep lying and I'll murder you in that chair. Because that was a great scene because it's like it's Al just slowly beating the truth out of someone who's not really on par with what Swearingen's intellect is capable of sussing out.
Right.
And the Wyatt thing is the same way, which is that Al does the same exact thing, which is that he gets Wyatt to basically talk himself into contortions, and Swearingen figures out that the story is bullshit that they've been talking about. And
yeah,
I think that I think what the show is trying to do when it ties into the larger theme with the Earps is that it's coming back to this idea that has always been there since the beginning, and it's the lie agreed upon story, which is that like a lot of society and like business and enterprises and towns and religion and stuff is just this like collaborative imagination that's going on. Like people are sort of telling stories about things. And I think that the Earps fit into that because the Earps don't match the mythology that you'd expect them to have. And I think that's the show playing it. And what Al does is when he dismantles their story, he kind of dismantles the myth of Earp at the same time.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So that's why I think that they're kind of pathetic. And I think that the reason he's trying to do this performative thing is he's trying to play himself up as the hero. But the show is more interested in the examination of like, what if Wyatt Earp is lying about these things that happened to him, and what kind of person does that make him? And I thought that they did a good job of having Al be that character because it's a callback to a scene that I really liked in the first season and all that stuff.
Yeah, which is interesting because what they're really doing that in service for the audience more than anybody else in the show. Then, right?
Yeah, yes, and maybe that's why people don't like it too. Yeah,
yeah, because like I could see that being more of a scene. If the Wyatt Earp who shows up in this show is the Wyatt Earp who is a known name and has the legend of the OK Corral at his back and all that kind of stuff, but and going into that scene, that's the person that Al dismantles,
right?
But the fact that they're not doing that is it very much seems like yes, that dismantling they're doing is not for anybody in the show because. In the show, Wyatt Earp is just a guy.
Just
a guy.
Yeah.
But they're doing it specifically for the audience.
Yeah, and I think it ties into larger. This felt like a very theatrical episode to me. Like down to the theater. The theater troupe scene is particularly theatrical, but a lot of this there's Joni's talking to the fat guy who's Mose Manuel. In the thing, he has a great line where she says, "Does that trouble you, keeping watch on a dark place?" And he says, "No, ma'am, it does not, especially when I know the light's coming to it."
It's a good line.
That's very theatrical too. The way it's staged is very stagey looking.
Yeah, that's like the last line in a play before the spotlight, the person walks out, the spotlight dims down.
It is, and I think the episode itself feels that way, and I think that the. In that theatrical sense, it's what you're saying, which is that it's more for the audience being aware that they're watching a play, which I think plays into what the episode is trying to do, which is that lie thing, which is that like all of this is kind of a construction that we're all doing. Like the thing that makes us human is our ability to use our imaginations and come up with these stories that we tell each other and how we present ourselves and the institutions and all that stuff. And I think that's what I like about it, is that it's the show getting a little bit outside of itself, and it's playing with those ideas about like there is an audience watching this show. How can we tweak it a little bit? And the reason that I really like it is that at this point, it's whatever that person said in the Deadwood book, is that at this point it's just a hangout show, and I like seeing new characters come into old character scenes and do something with them.
Yeah.
So I like it for that reason, although I would completely understand. This is an episode that has a lot of theater troupe and it has new Earp characters in it. And I can understand people. Yeah. I don't know how you felt about whether or not you thought that the hearse thing had kind of come to a screeching halt, or whether the momentum of this episode felt like it was an abrupt stop to everything that was happening.
No, I actually thought the hearse stuff was really good in this episode. I thought the scene with him and Merrick was great.
Yes.
Like he's so intimidating in that scene.
You were less majestically neutral than cloaking your cowardice and principle.
Yeah, like the way that he plays that is like I don't even really know how to describe the way that he plays that in where he's doing that thing where he's like he's not being outright aggressive, at least when he shows up initially, in the words that he's saying.
Right.
But there's whatever it is, the energy behind his eyes is just like intimidating as hell.
It's the same as it's the same energy as when he's talking to Aunt Lou in this episode. And she's asking him for help to find Odell, and he has a sort of like well, then people would know that a colored person asked me for a favor, right? Like he has this sort of like, he's not being overtly cruel, but his energy is definitely like, you don't want to fuck with me right now at this point. Yeah. So,
and it also like, being as someone who doesn't have to interact with a lot of people day to day because I work from home and stuff, you kind of forget how off-putting it is when someone just continues to get closer and closer to you when they talk. And so the way that Hearst is just like stalking up to Merrick is just very off-putting. And very, like, especially for someone like Hearst, where you don't know what the hell this guy's going to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought they did a good job of keeping the anticipation of the arrival of the gunman going through the episode, because like every time someone I keep bringing it up, and anytime somebody rolls into town, it's like, is this them? It's like, oh no, it's just a bunch of shit kickers. So I thought that stuff was good. The stuff with the actor was kind of weird with the back thing, but I'm starting to see why you like Hearst so much based on his chronic back pain.
Yeah, I relate strongly to his chronic back pain, and I feel for him that he'll never. He's at an age of medicine where he can't have anything done to alleviate it. I find the Langrishe and Hearst thing to be another kind of weird story where I can see people not liking it, right? Because it does something to it. It does something to Hearst, which is that it depowers him for a scene, and he's in the hands of, because Hearst is so desperate for his back pain to go away, and they have done a good job of laying this out that he has severe back pain, and he always has to like lie down and is looking for a reason to alleviate it. They bring in Langrishe, who basically sort of runs a con on it. They're never explicit about what's going on. My impression is always that he's trying to get close to Hearst in order to either get information for Al or to sort of set up Hearst for something down the line.
Yeah, I wasn't totally sure what was going on. Like, I knew obviously whatever he was going to do was going to be bullshit, but I didn't know what his end game was.
I don't think he has one. And the only thing that they get out of it is they kind of embarrass him at the end, right? When they're waving to him from across the way, and it's clear that Langrishe knows Swearingen, and that's revealed to him, and Hearst is sort of like putting the dots together. But the scene itself is another example of just like, in the way that Wyatt Earp's story is a deconstruction of what his myth is supposed to be, Langrishe is doing the same version of like a medical story that he's telling. Like, Hearst is so desperate for pain relief that he's willing to buy this sort of like cockamamie, solution to the problem. And he buys into that in the same way that people buy into the myth of the Earp brothers and stuff. And I think it's just another storyline that's going along the lines of like, people are going to buy into these constructions that we assemble and show each other, and like how a lot of interactions are kind of bullshit between people. It's like you can't really tell what the intentions of someone are when they're telling you something that you want to hear, and you're buying into a different version of the story. And so it's maybe not a super effective, memorable plot line that people are going to say is one of the top scenes in Deadwood when Hearst gets his back massaged from Langrishe, but I think it works in the context of the episode itself. And I like the moment at the end where he's like, Mr. Hearst, and then he does like the me and him pointing between Swearingen. He's like, old friends, old friends.
If I was Al, I would have turned to Langrishe and be like, there's a good chance he kills you tomorrow. I mean, also though, like, any reason, if you have Brian Cox and what's his name, McRaney?
Gerald McRaney.
Gerald McRaney. If you have them both in your cast and you don't put them in a scene together, especially with McRaney just hitting threes every scene he's in, probably you got to find an excuse to put them together.
Yeah, and they did in this one. I think it's the first time it is the first time because they introduced each other to each other, or they introduced themselves to each other. Yeah. Did you? Other than the other theater troupe exercise is the death of Chesterfield. I think his name is like Chesterfield or something. Chesterton is his name. Who I am not exactly clear what his role is in the theater troupe or what he does. But he dies in this episode.
Is he supposed to be the producer? Because it felt like it was a matter of him
He keeps calling Jack the producer, doesn't he? Is
Well,
that the handoff that he's
That's
doing?
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It was some sort of like handoff.
He could be. But he has
and
very
if-
actorly vibes about him, you know?
Just start off as an actor, like Langrish.
Right,
He was an actor first,
Patrick
and
Stewart.
he rised up. Yeah. Or William Shakespeare. He was an actor before he was a writer, if he even existed in the way that we believe him to exist.
Well, we got some King Lear in this episode.
Or was he really? Or was he really 5 people?
Right. Was
Whatever.
he an AI construct? Was he Sid 6.7? Another virtuosity reference, Clay, and you didn't like that movie, but it fits into everything.
I will be honest. When Chesterton started to die, I also started to fall asleep. Like I felt it was a very identifiable scene because as he started to nod off, I was like right there with him, listening to Brian Cox lull me into death. But that was that stuff is I guess it's it works two ways in the themes that you're talking about, right? Because like the last thing that they're doing is it's Langrish lying to him. Well, they're
acting. They're pretending.
They're acting. They're choosing to believe that they are on stage.
Yep.
And then the really interesting thing is what happens after that, which is the other people of the acting troupe walk out of the shadows like the audience.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Which was pretty interesting. So
yeah.
Claudia and the Countess have embroidered the tabs in gold. Thalia and Melpomene.
Belie the masks. Same damn thing, Jack. Comedy and tragedy.
The curtain rises. The stage is set before us.
What's the rake?
18 to 1, old trooper. Dost thou know, Dover? There is a cliff whose high unbending head looks fearfully on the confined deep. Bring me but to the brim of it, and from that place I shall no leading need. Here's the fly tower. If you mount up, take firm a rail in each hand. I'll boost your bum, darling.
Here's the place.
How fearful and dizzy it is to cast one's eyes so low.
Set me where you stand. Let go my hand.
You are now within a foot.
Line. Lie.
No, it's what you're sort of hinting at. That's exactly what I think it is. It's another scene that is saying that life is basically acting. Like there's a sense that like these guys are living the way that they wanted to live, and they're being truthful about the way that they're living by knowing that they're actors in a play. It's the Shakespeare all the world's indeed a stage, sort of literalized for them.
That's Rush, I believe.
But isn't it Shakespeare?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
You had me worried there for a second. And
you don't remember the second quatrain where Shakespeare talks about how living in the limelight is the
modern day
universal-
warrior, mean stride. Yeah. It's all there in the original text.
Bill, who's this Tom Sawyer fellow you keep writing about?
Yeah, no, Shakespeare wasn't influenced by Ayn Rand at that point. I don't think we haven't talked about like Rush. Rush is such a weird. Parrott was such a weird lyricist. Like I have a real problem with Rush lyrics, but we don't have to get into that now. I think it's on.
I
Patreon
find
or
them.
something.
No, we're getting into it. I find them endlessly fascinating because basically every song that's not about like the future or a planet is about how much Neil Peart doesn't like other people.
It doesn't like being popular in a semi-popular, semi-cultish band.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think he's too. I find his lyrically. I find him like too. He writes lyrics the way that he drums, which is that it's like
okay. Yeah.
If you've ever watched Peart drum, he does not look like his body was built for drumming. Like it looks uncomfortable.
Sure.
He doesn't have a smooth physicality that a lot of like really great drummers had. He really looks like he's working, and his lyrics are like he's really working to get something here. Like his word choice is a little bit off. It's like clunky. It's not particularly poetic. It's poetic, but it's very.
What are you talking
blunt.
about? If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Come on, man, that's great.
I just find
I do really like that line. That's a good line.
It is a good line. He's very angular. He's very like Amy Hates the Trees song.
Oh, that one's a little on the nose, but
well,
yeah.
I find that's all of his songs are kind of like that. It's like I kind of think it's clever, but at the same time I'm like, this is fucking stupid.
Or is it 20? Is it 2112 that has that big like 8-minute intro, and then the first line is, "And the meek shall inherit the earth." It's like okay,
yeah. That's Neil Peart, I suppose. Tragically, no longer with us. But yeah, we'll have a Patreon about Rush. But yeah, sorry, I was just the theater troupe is that. The theater troupe is
2112 is long enough. We could probably get a season out of covering it.
I know. Yeah, we'd have to break it. I only like the one part of it, of 21. I like the Temples of Syrinx. That's the only song that I'm like, oh, this is a good song.
You don't like the 12 minutes that's just a person discovering the concept of the guitar?
That's me every time I listen to a Rush album, Clay. Things I'd never heard before. Yeah, but if you think anything, if you are wondering about the theater troupe, I think that this episode and the next episode are kind of the summation of what the theater troupe represents in this season. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you've been impressed by them or thought that they've been a colossal. Are they better or worse than the Ms. Isringhausen storyline from the second season?
I think it's better.
Okay.
I think that's 90% Brian Cox.
Yep.
Because like at least the Isringhausen stuff kind of had a point, sort of. Like if you want to talk about how it, let's put it this way, at least it involved a main character from the show in some respect.
Yep.
Whereas this feels very separate from everything else. Like it does not feel like it's part of the same show.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree. I don't mind them. I thought the death scene with Chesterton was kind of touching. I liked the idea.
It is.
I like the idea that they're using King Lear as a representation. They're acting out the relationship that they have through King Lear, which is, I guess I don't really know. I had to look this up, but it's about someone being led up to a high cliff to kill themselves. And that's what ends Chesterton's life, is when he finishes that. I like it. I like that his final words are line, like he's looking for the line.
Yep.
Yeah, and what you were saying, that the actors coming out of the shadows of the audience at the end of it is a nice touch. And I think it fits thematically into a... I really like the Milch focus on this idea of the construct of ideas, and that, like, it's a if you've ever read like Yuval Noah Harari, I think he had that famous *Sapiens* book a couple years ago. He's big into that kind of idea. You know, humans are special because we have this language, and we've allowed ourselves to create imaginary things that we then put value into, and we sort of treat with great respect, and it binds us in a certain way. Like everyone buys into
Like
the
money.
lie. Money is the good example of it. Yeah. A piece of paper is valuable in some sense. A piece of paper means more than another piece of paper that's identical to it. And that kind of thing. And I think the show goes back to that quite frequently, and I think that it's interesting. And it does it through, marriage. It does it through friendship. It does it through the various institutions of the town, whether or not this means anything. What does it mean? Why does it matter to people? And this episode's maybe not a shoot 'em up classic, but I think it deals with the themes well enough.
And I think the whole show, like even just the choice of setting for the show is very much in line with that idea too, right? Because he's choosing to make a Western, which has its own set of agreed upon lies from the popular culture, right?
Right. Yeah. The stereotypes of the Westerns. Yeah.
Yeah. The Western era to most people is a fantasy. What their understanding of what the Old West was like is just a pure fantasy.
Right. Yeah. And the building of
so-
the town, like it allows
Right.
for that kind of sense of like something's being created here, but it's just an illusion in a lot of ways about what's being built.
Yeah.
What's the other story?
Farewell to Kings. That's my favorite album. That's a good one.
The favorite Rush album.
Yeah. The Farewell to Kings, that first song is pretty killer.
Yeah, I'll either go with I'm not the moving pictures, and what's the other one with natural science and Jacob's Ladder on it? I think it came out right before Moving Pictures. I thought that was their peak.
Before Moving Pictures?
Is it natural? Is the album called Natural Science?
Maybe.
Let me say Rush, Natural Science. That's a
Xanadu?
great song to play
Great
along
song.
to.
Oh yeah.
This is Permanent Waves. Yes, that's the album.
Permanent Waves. Yes. That's a good one.
Yeah, that has, what does that have? Spirit of the Radio. Yeah, that's on that one. The hell's the track list? Spirit of the Radio, Free Will, Jacob's Ladder, Entre Nous, Different Strings, and Natural Science. Yeah, that's a good one. Anyway, to Deadwood. There's any scenes that we missed here? There's no Alma and Ellsworth in this episode.
No. Which is weird because it's in the previously on.
Oh, are they? Yes, they're
Yeah.
a little breakup. Yeah.
There's the weird morning after scene with Jane and Joni.
Yes, yeah. Jane goes off on her own.
I think the woman who plays Jane should have gotten an Emmy because her line delivery is excellent.
Yeah,
like her comic timing to undersell things. Like when she's getting dressed and she's like, "I farted. I'm sorry if you smell it." And then like when they're leaving, Joni like very passionately turns back and says, "I'm getting out of here. I'm getting my own room. I'm moving out of here." And she's like, "Well, I'm not. I never lived here. See ya."
Yeah,
she's so good.
She is, yeah. She is good. Robin Weigert, I think her name is. Yeah. She is very strong. I have to mention now the random factoid that Shaughnessy, who owns that boarding house that they're staying at, is Tim Driscoll from season 1, which I did not make the connection.
Is he really?
Yeah,
No
so
kidding.
that's an interesting connection that I didn't realize. The other people who are in, I guess we can talk about Odell. So Odell is gone at this point. I don't know if there's much more to say about that, but Odell has left to go meet with Hearst's man in New York. And I guess that more easily ties us into the general who is trying to leave the camp, and Steve is being horrible to him. And then as in an attempt to keep the general around in the way that Steve actually wants him to stick around with him because he's lonely. His loneliness like overpowers his bigotry. He tries to de-shoe the general's horse and he gets kicked in the head and is now basically comatose, still alive, but non-functional and basically brain dead. And the general is going to take care of him, is the implication at the end of this, where he throws food at him at first, and then he later on in the later scene is sitting there looking at the food covering Steve's face, and he starts to feel sad for him and wipes it off and just looks at him sort of like, well, what the fuck are you going to do? So, did you think about that storyline? Anything interesting there? Did you expect the quote unquote death of Steve?
I felt it coming after he got kicked in the crotch. I was like, this. I feel like once he started going for the horse's shoe, I'm like, there's
always
no way
bad.
There's no way this ends well. I do find the interesting thing about Steve is that I feel like he and Jane are written in very similar ways. for instance, like there's the scene where Steve is yelling at the general about the fact that he's leaving, and he says he goes into the thing about he would never put his name on the sign because he'll never be equal.
Yeah, people will see them as equals if their names are both on the sign.
Right. And then he comes back and he says, like, even if I did, let's say, put your name on the sign, that wouldn't mean anything. And it's like
we'd
Steve's
still know the
way
truth.
of
We'd still know the truth. Yeah.
It's Steve's way of like basically offering him a job and asking him to stay, sort of.
Yeah.
But he's such a dickhead that he can't just come out and say it. And I feel like Jane has very similar dialogue like that sometimes, where she kind of like the things that she wants are hidden inside of insults and weird roundabout ways of saying things.
Yeah, she'll always be asking someone like Charlie if he's going to go somewhere, and if he gives an answer, she'll then insult him to make it seem like she doesn't care about where he's off to. So it's
and then she'll be like, and even if you did go and you happened to see my sister, and I wouldn't tell you to say anything on my behalf, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So Steve gets taken out of this one. Steve is one of my Steve's a truly reprehensible character, but I've really enjoyed him this rewatch. I think that he's
good.
It's a terrific performance coupled with a really like one of those characters that's just so fucking annoying that it just really gets to you. And he's I think that he has an interesting amount of like depth to his characterization. Like I think that they did a good enough job of giving him at least enough of a little bit of a backstory that you kind of understand where he's coming from, even though you disagree with him. He's not just a racist guy who's sitting at the bar for no reason. And the acting performance is terrific, and Milch gave him some excellent lines, I think.
Don't think you was offered a job here last night. Gauging the fucking level you'd fucking presume to was all that was. Maybe you declined because you thought you ought to be partners in the fucking business. Your name on the signage like a human's. Or God hadn't set man apart from the fucking beasts.
I got an errand. Then I'm going to San Francisco.
We will never be equal. Sign or fucking no. And if I agreed to your name on the signage, we would know the fucking truth still. Fucking nigger bastard! Human to leave without my consent.
I think it's funny that even he thinks everyone's out to get him, even the horses.
Yes. Yeah.
Like when he starts when he starts talking to the horse about like, that's exactly what you would do, you son of a bitch. I'm like, okay. There's no helping this guy.
No, he's a man of his word. What'd you think about the ending with the general in this one, where he wipes off his face after he threw the food at him?
I thought that was nice. Yeah, the general is a real fascinating character because he is always seems like he's trying to make sure that he's one step ahead of everything and try to get out before somebody can get him.
Yeah.
And to see him kind of break that characteristic, especially for someone like Steve, who is just,
has not been helpful to him whatsoever.
Yeah, no one would blame the general if he just fucking left. There's no reason why he needs to stick around and take care of this guy. But I think it's him being literally helpless. I think kind of just is the literalization of Steve's inner helplessness.
Yeah, his inner need for at a point where he can't refuse or he can't insult the general, it actually becomes a relationship at that point. It's like he can't counteract with his venom, and so there is no negativity that stops them from being in a mutual sort of understanding of a relationship or something like that. Yeah, I always a little bit misremember it. I always when it happens and the general goes in and finds him, I always think that there's going to be something of like blaming him, like that he hit him with a shovel or something like that, but they don't do that. He goes and gets the doc and he looks at him. He doesn't try to run away or anything, thinking that people would blame him. There's that story. I like the Bullocks having their marital strife when Bullock is upset about the meeting that he had and the state of his letter. And he's taking it out on Martha, who's being, in his opinion, too slow to move the children into the new schoolhouse. But that felt like a nice little touch. And she has the very funny line about, you didn't come in with your customary sweetness or whatever she says. He's like, I'll give you double the sweetness tonight. And she smiles. Anything else? Is there any other plots in this one? No, just the bricks arrive. Hearst's men arrive. The Pinkertons arrive at the end of the episode, and Leviathan fucking smiles. Don't really know much. There's nothing else there about that. I assume we'll deal with that in the next episode. And before, I guess the final thing I have to say is I really like Blazanoff too, and his delivery of the sheriff is getting a blowjob.
Yes.
It's very funny. Very good. Anything here? Do you have anything else you wanted to say about this one? The
only thing I forgot to mention this when we were talking about the death scene of Chesterton, when they sat down on the stage and like Brian Cox kind of like leans over into camera. The only thing I could think of was him saying like, have I ever told you the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
It is very. He said no one had to die, or whatever that line is. Yeah. No, he doesn't. He goes the opposite way. He just kills him.
Can I learn how to become a theater producer? Not from a Jedi.
Yep. No, I don't think I have. There's nothing else I don't think in this one. Yeah, so would you put this on Vulture's bottom of the list? Would you say, good job, writer, in 2019, this is where you did it. You nailed it. And I guess that the other thing to say about this is that I guess I'm curious about your opinion as well. You're watching this at a point in the future where you know that there's only 4 episodes of the show left, right? 4 or 5 or something. So does what happens in this episode feel more of a distraction in that case? Because if you're watching the show in real time, you don't really know what's going to happen with the next season or whether or not it's going to continue. But knowing the show is ending very soon, did you feel any different way about that episode? And like, do you think that the writer of that listicle considered that to be the reason why it's so bad?
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was saying initially. Is it? Excuse me. It feels like that is being criticized from a hindsight perspective.
Yeah.
Because like if you know that this show ends in 4 episodes and they're spending 20 minutes of the show talking to a dying actor and introducing Wyatt Earp into the fray, like it kind of feels like it's a little bit all over the place,
right? Not the time or the place that there should be,
right?
Yeah.
And you know, if you're watching it with that same sort of modern eye that we've talked about is detrimental to it, where you're focused on the plot more than what else, the kind of hangout aspect.
Yeah,
I can see it. I could see watching this going like, all right, well, what the fuck does Wyatt Earp have to do with Hearst and the 23 people or whatever? You know, I can see that being, but like outside of that, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. It was. I think it's an enjoyable. It continues to be a show where, at the very least, the individual scenes I find are very enjoyable. Yeah. And I'm gonna straight up say no. This is not the worst. I don't know what the worst episode of the show is.
You're right.
Honestly.
Yeah, it all kind of blends together after you watch them.
But like, I thought it was pretty good as far as the way that they kept the Hearst stuff running. the anticipation of the guy showing up running through the thing.
There's a little bit of they try to connect the Earps to Hearst too, because people are trying to recruit them before the Pinkertons come.
The only thing that I couldn't really grasp was I was getting lost as to what Tolliver was doing, because again, at this point in the show, every single thing Tolliver does is like every scene with him is like, I've got the perfect plan. I'm going to tell you what my plan is, and it's going to make me the number one guy. It's like, I don't know, man. What was he trying to? I wasn't sure what he was trying to do with the Earps in the Bella Union.
Recruit them for Hearst, I think, is my understanding.
Yeah. Okay, and then the scene with him and Hearst was basically him just saying like, I think I can get these guys to work for you.
Yeah, to be the muscle, but he doesn't need them.
Like even that feels like I feel like that's probably my least favorite part of the episode, just because it feels very samey for Tolliver. Like I said, a lot of his scenes tend to be the same thing at this point.
Yeah,
I don't know. I didn't really care about that.
No, the show isn't particularly drawing a lot of attention to it, but Tolliver's flailing as a character in a way that they're doing. Like, he has no power anymore. He's not a player. Like, he's subservient to Hearst. And in the last episode, they had a scene where he was kind of helping Al. And it strikes me as Tolliver's just trying to figure out who's going to win this thing. And so he's sort of like trying to just position himself to be in second place no matter what.
Right.
Which is... Booth's performance is still terrific, but I think that Tolliver as a character has lost a lot of chutzpah. And in the Deadwood Bible, there's an implication that this was intentional from Milch's part, is that they were trying to punish him for his difficulties in the first 2 seasons.
Man, what a... Milch is an asshole.
He certainly lets the actors that he doesn't get along with know that he's not getting along with them. Yeah, so that's it. But yeah,
the one other thing that I was surprised by is that apparently Richardson can read.
Yes, that's a little twist. Yeah. He waits for the paper and he reads it in the morning. Yep, yeah, Richardson can read. I think that's pretty much it then. Yeah, so I'll say I would probably say that there is likely a second season episode that I would say is worse. Now that I have the second season in hindsight a little bit.
Yeah. I would agree with that, probably, yeah.
I generally like all the tone of the third season episodes. I like where the show sits at this point. I like how all the actors play against each other. Even in a... I have a hard time criticizing the show for its sort of wandering plot stuff. It's like, because I've said it multiple times, but it's not the show that I really cared that much about the plot at all. It's really a show that I watch the actors, I watch their scenes, and I try to like unravel the dialogue a little bit more every time I hear it. And that's where it sits for me. It's just this kind of beautifully written dialogue-based show where 2 characters are talking to each other about something, and occasionally like a little turn of phrase will catch your ear and make things interesting.
Yeah, I really I want to apologize in advance to whoever reads the next comic that I write, because I have a feeling you're gonna read and be like, what the fuck is this about? What is he trying to? And it's just be like, that's just me trying to write Deadwood. I've been watching Deadwood for the past 3 months, and it's just stuck in my head, because I don't even know how you start to like write that stuff.
I know it's twisted. It's very Yeah, I guess the best insight is, Milch just would write verbally. He would have someone dictate what he was saying.
Right.
And so it is really, you do get the sense that he has to say it out loud to understand it and to like it, because a lot of the syntax doesn't make a lot of sense if you wrote it on the page that way.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to do that? Have you ever tried to dictate? I find it very difficult.
No, because the AI apps aren't good enough at capturing it. You would need an assistant. You'd need someone who's like hearing what you're saying.
Have you ever left yourself like an audio note or something, or tried to do like a voice memo?
No.
Anything? I find it very difficult, because like if I'm sitting at a computer, I can type basically at the speed of thought.
Right.
But
yes. Yeah.
The minute that I have to like verbalize into a machine, like on the podcast, it's whatever. But like if I was trying to take a note, it always ends up being like, note to self, new scene.
Hey, Clay.
Batman goes into the car starts the car, gets the key, starts the car, drives away. Like that's what it just
right. Yeah, it's not worth it.
It's just really, for whatever reason, it just does not compute as smoothly as if I'm typing.
No, it's a little bit of work to access it too. It's not like a note you can just stick it onto your computer or something like that and have it right there. It's like you got to open the audio file, you got to listen to it. You can't immediately get you can't get the point of what you were talking about.
I will say though, there might be a benefit to it because unlike if you're typing, if you're saying it out loud, it really makes it real, and you probably very immediately can go, "Oh, that's terrible."
Yeah, in terms of like proofreading yourself and by saying it, you mean? Is that what you meant? Sorry?
Yeah. So like, there's certain dialogue for a show or a movie where you can type it, but if you say it, it just doesn't work.
Right.
It's not the way people talk.
Yes.
And I think there's certain ideas that if you were to verbalize them instead of typing them, you would probably in that moment go like, yeah, no, that's actually kind of stupid.
Yeah, I've heard that from audiobook readers that they realize that they wrote something badly when they read their book and they're like, I can't say this line this way. And that probably should have been rewritten at that point. So we can close with the King Lear. It's not King Lear. It's Chesterton's line that I really like is when he's talking about the masks of theater. He says, "A lie, the masks, same damn thing, Jack. Comedy and tragedy," which I think
he doesn't know the formula.
No,
the formula is tragedy plus time equals comedy.
That's it for Leviathan Smiles. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Something Pretty podcast. You can support the show at patreon.com/thepenskyfile. There's a whole bunch of stuff up there. Even if this podcast is over and you're coming to us in the year 2037 or something like that, you can still maybe support us on Patreon if Patreon still exists. Check it out. Let me know. Find me, hit me up, and let me know if Patreon still exists and if you're listening to the podcast. But that's it. That's the best way to support us. Over there, patreon.com/thepenskyfile. We'll be back with the next episode of Deadwood, which I don't have. Oh, it's called Amateur Night, I think, is the next one.
Ooh, sexy.
Yeah, so Clay, it is the Amateur Night, the 9th episode. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we go?
Check out the Rotten Horror Picture Show. We're doing Video Nasties on Patreon this year. We just did Dario Argento's Inferno. Up next in October is Last House on the Left, which is going to be a something. And we'll be back relatively soon, I think, with Badass to do Return of the Joker. I might see if Sean wants to do like a mid-Kickstarter campaign thing and talk about that a bit because his Zorro campaign is currently up and running.
Yes.
If anybody wants to check that out. I'm sure he's got plenty he wants to talk about.
About Zorro or about the Batman thing?
Probably both.
Both. He's brimming with energy, that young man. So I guess we'll go out. Do you have any Deadwood quotes sort of sticking in your ear at this point? Not from this episode in particular. Is there anything from the series that you would say like that's your Deadwood quote of the whole thing?
I really hate to say this, but "You suck cock by choice" is just such a good line.
Those who doubt me suck cock by choice.
Yes, yeah, it's so good. It's. I wish I could think of something more
poetic. But that's poetic. Actually, it is pretty. Yeah. It is a poetic. It's a very. It's. I think we talked about it at the time, but it's a perfect little joke line because the shock value of it is so funny to me.
Yes. Yeah.
I like that one. Tom Nuttall is an underappreciated quote machine for the show, I think, because he has "corruption won't never breathe stinky on my bicycle," which I think is a very funny line. Yeah, I still day to day think about look at him striding around like a Randy fucking maniac bishop is something that I think about all the time with the people who walk around outside. Yeah, those.
I know I wrote some down in the earlier episodes, but I can't remember them off the top of my head.
Yeah, the Wild Bill, the cunt scene with Jack McCall.
Oh, yes,
that's a whole string. That's very excellent. Whole bunches of these things. I find that they little turns like stick in my ear. And they just become sort of like something that I just think about throughout the day. But I thought that the less majestically neutral than cloaking your cowardice in principle is a good one. I honestly like good. Reading the lines is funny. I have to praise the actors for memorizing this stuff and being able to say it convincingly and not stumble over it. I just read it and I couldn't get through. You are less majestic. Because when I read it, it sounds like I'm reading like a medical dictionary or something. Right, like there's no flow to it the way that I say it. But McRaney sells the fuck out of that line.
Yeah, you got to know it and you got to sell it.
Yes.
Very difficult.
Yeah, it's probably maybe similar to Star Trek in that they don't have... You probably don't want to think about what you're saying too much, right? You just have to memorize it and understand why you're saying it or what the intent of it is supposed to be.
Again, I feel like it's kind of like Shakespeare. Like I'm convinced that most people who perform Shakespeare, it's like
you're not internalizing it as you're saying it.
What is the emotion of the scene? Okay, I understand that, and now I will say these words that with that behind it. I'm sure I'm insulting everyone who works very hard to. I once saw a clip of there's a great on YouTube. It's like an actor's workshop from it's got to be like the late 70s, somewhere in the 70s of Shakespearean actors, British Shakespearean actors, and it's featuring both Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. Mm-hmm. Patrick Stewart has hair in a way that's very kind of off-putting.
Yeah, upsetting.
But Ian McKellen was famous for playing King Lear, and so not King Lear, Macbeth. And so he does this thing about the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow speech.
Yep.
And it's like 5 minutes of him breaking down just what those three words mean in what they are referenced to and how one should project those where it's not just tirelessly listing the day. It's like this and this, and I'm like,
He's famous for saying the stress of that should be on the and instead of tomorrow. So it's and tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was pretty interesting, but it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess everybody who's the masters at any given profession or craft are going to see the details more than the people who are watching it, I guess. You know?
Yeah. Deadwood's a very pretty series, and we're almost done with it. This is Leviathan Smiles. We'll be back next week with Amateur Night. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Patreon.com/The Penske File. Support us there. Patreon.com/The Penske File. We'll see you later.
That thing is almost as good as the Michael Caine one where he's describing film acting, which is very much worth a watch. I highly recommend looking that one up.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will see you next week.
Morning. Good morning, Mr. Hurst. Very constructive reminder in this morning's edition. 12 days to the election. Will you continue to show that calendar, 11, 10 days, so on?
Assuming my press stays intact.
Thanks, too, for publishing Sheriff Bullock's letter of condolence to the family of that murdered worker of mine.
Oh, you're welcome.
I suppose I should have written him myself.
I'd not presume to suppose in that regard, Mr. Hurst, one way or another.
Was the sheriff's making his letter part of the public record meant to embarrass or reproach me?
I'd not suppose in that connection either.
I'm to take you for majestically neutral.
I'd make the less exalted claim as a journalist of keeping my opinions to myself.
You are less majestically neutral than cloaking your cowardice in principle.
I can only answer, perhaps, Mr. Hurst. Events have not yet disclosed to me all that I am.
Those kind of events could be in the weather, Merrick. You might have a second calendar for them.